Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about the 2013 Bohol earthquake in the Philippines. And I am so excited to dive into these sources that you've provided, really try to understand, not just the what and the where, but the why, the forces at play.
It's really interesting because this earthquake really redrew the seismic map for the region. There was this hidden danger that we didn't even know about.
Yeah. Okay, so let's set the scene a little bit. It's October 15, 2013, 8:12 in the morning, local time there in the Philippines. And a 7.2 magnitude earthquake hits Bohol Island, which, wow, that's equivalent to like 32 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy.
Wow. And of course, the human cost was pretty immense. 222 people lost their lives, and it was the deadliest earthquake in the Philippines in 23 years. Almost 1,000 people were injured, 976. Over 73,000 structures were damaged, 14,500 completely destroyed.
It's hard to even fathom that. The town of Loon was hit particularly hard, I understand.
It was, yeah. Loon had 67 casualties, the most for the earthquake. And it's interesting because the earthquake hit on the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, so a lot of people were home from work and school, which may have contributed to the death toll, but also some people think that it may have prevented an even greater loss of life.
And initially, I was reading that scientists thought this was the East Bohol Fault, the one that's already known. So what made them realize that wasn't actually what caused this earthquake?
Yeah, so the East Bohol Fault kind of seemed like the obvious answer, but when they looked at the characteristics of the earthquake, it didn't really match up. And so as they investigated further, they uncovered this previously unknown fault line, which they called the North Bohol Fault. It runs parallel to the island's northwest coast.
Like a hidden fault line.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I was reading a little bit about a fold and thrust belt. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what does that even mean?
Sure. So basically, you can imagine the Visayan Sea basin is being squeezed on both sides. And so it's causing the island of Bohol to deform.
I can create this fault line.
So like a piece of paper, if you're crumpling it up, all those folds are kind of like the Earth's crust.
Exactly. And in some areas, the ground was actually displaced by up to 5 meters.
Which is a lot.
Wow, 5 meters. Like waking up and your car's on your roof.
Right.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the earthquake essentially ripped this fault line open. Did that happen all at once? Or was it more of a gradual process?
It was sudden rupture, and that's what caused the earthquake. But it wasn't a one-and-done event. There were thousands of aftershocks that continued to rattle the region and caused, more damage and fear.
Yeah, imagine going through that earthquake and then constantly feeling these aftershocks. I can't even imagine how terrifying that would be. Were there any particularly strong aftershocks?
There were a few. On October 26th, there was a 5.3 magnitude tremor that hit. And then on November 12th, there was a 4.8 magnitude quake that was centered near San Isidro.
Wow, the Earth just kept moving. And I read that wasn't the only natural disaster that hit Bohol that year. Didn't a typhoon also hit the area shortly after the earthquake?
It did, yeah. Just 3 weeks after the earthquake. Super Typhoon Haiyan, which is known locally as Yolanda, slammed into the Philippines. And while the eye of the storm spared the earthquake-stricken area, it still caused significant problems with, tens of thousands of Boholanos who were already in temporary shelters, forced to evacuate once again.
Oh my gosh, talk about adding insult to injury. So a super typhoon on top of an earthquake. Do you think anyone anticipated just how vulnerable the area was?
Well, I think it really highlights the challenges that communities face when multiple disasters strike in quick succession. The earthquake already stretched resources thin, and then the typhoon just compounded that problem.
Right, making recovery efforts even more difficult, imagine. And it seems like a lot of these articles focus on the damage to like buildings and infrastructure, but I'm curious to know more about like the impact on the people. Did you come across any personal accounts or stories about how people coped in the aftermath?
Yeah. A lot of the reports talk about the resilience of the Boholanos. Despite the hardship they faced, they came together to support each other, to rebuild their homes, and try to restore a sense of normalcy.
That's inspiring to hear. But I imagine the physical damage was pretty staggering. Did the articles give any sense of the overall cost?
Yeah, the total cost of the damage reached a staggering $2.25 billion. And it's not just about the numbers. We're talking about the heart of the community. Some of Bohol's most iconic landmarks were severely damaged. Historic churches, centuries old, just crumbled under the force of the quake. The Lobak Church, the Loon Church, and the Marabojak Church were practically reduced to rubble. And even the historic Beclean Church, with its beautiful facade and bell tower, wasn't spared.
Wow. It's hard to imagine structures that stood for generations just collapsing like that. And did any of the articles mention the Chocolate Hills? I've always been so fascinated by them.
Oh, yeah, they weren't immune to the earthquake's power either. Some of the Chocolate Hills actually experienced landslides, which altered their distinctive landscape. It really goes to show how even seemingly permanent landscapes can be reshaped in an instant.
Yeah, that's a powerful image. What about the people who were in hospitals when the earthquake hit? Were they able to get to safety?
Well, sadly, the provincial hospital in Loon collapsed, trapping patients and medical staff inside. It was a very chaotic and terrifying scene. Rescuers worked tirelessly to pull survivors from the wreckage, but it was a stark reminder of how vulnerable we are during these events.
And I imagine with so much damage to infrastructure, getting help to those who needed it must have been a major challenge.
Oh, absolutely. 32 bridges and 13 road sections were damaged, which made it incredibly difficult for emergency responders and aid organizations to reach the affected areas.
Wow. So it's almost like having a lifeline suddenly severed. And was communication affected at all?
Yeah, communication was severely disrupted. The power outages caused by the earthquake made communication extremely difficult. It was a logistical nightmare trying to coordinate rescue efforts and get information to and from the affected communities.
Wow. That sounds incredibly difficult. And this really highlights the importance of having, robust communication systems in place for disaster preparedness.
Yeah, it's about thinking ahead and anticipating potential vulnerabilities. And in the case of the Bohol earthquake, one of the biggest vulnerabilities was this previously unknown fault line.
Right. So the question then becomes, what can we learn from this? And are there other hidden faults out there just waiting to unleash their energy?
Well, that's a question that seismologists are actively trying to answer. The Bohol earthquake was a wake-up call. That highlighted the limitations of our current understanding of earthquake prediction and risk assessment. It's not just about studying known fault lines, but about constantly reassessing our knowledge and being prepared for the unexpected.
So almost like trying to solve a giant puzzle where the pieces are constantly shifting.
Exactly.
And we don't always have all the information.
Yeah. We need to be proactive in identifying potential risks, and that involves, advanced technology, like improved mapping techniques. But it also requires engaging with local communities, listening to their experiences, and incorporating their traditional knowledge into our scientific understanding.
So combining scientific data with local knowledge to give us a much more comprehensive picture.
Exactly.
Okay. But even with all the preparation in the world, isn't there always going to be some element of uncertainty when it comes to earthquakes?
Of course. We can't completely eliminate the risk, but we can certainly take steps to mitigate the impact and build more resilient communities.
So focusing on things like having clear evacuation plans, making sure buildings are up to code, and having emergency supplies readily available.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical preparedness. It's also about mental and emotional resilience. Knowing what to do during an earthquake and having a plan in place can help reduce anxiety and fear.
Right, which are totally natural responses to a traumatic event.
Absolutely.
Did you come across any information about how the local communities have been rebuilding?
I did. A lot of the reports highlight the remarkable progress that's been made in Bohol. Homes and infrastructure have been rebuilt, and there's been a focus on incorporating lessons learned from the earthquake into the rebuilding process.
Oh, great.
For example, there are stricter building codes now, and communities are working together to develop more effective disaster preparedness plans.
So they're not just rebuilding what was lost.
Yeah.
But they're building back stronger and more resilient.
Exactly. And that's where I think the true story of resilience lies. It's not just about bouncing back from adversity. It's about learning from those experiences and using that knowledge to create a safer and more sustainable future.
So while the Bohol earthquake was undeniably a tragedy, it also seems to have been a catalyst for positive change.
Absolutely. It's forced us to confront our vulnerabilities, to reevaluate our understanding of seismic risks, and to prioritize the importance of disaster preparedness.
It seems like the Bohol earthquake was a pivotal event, not just for the Philippines, but for our understanding of earthquakes on a global scale.
It was. The discovery of the North Bohol Fault was a major development in the field of seismology. It challenged our assumptions and prompted a reassessment of seismic hazard maps in other parts of the world.
It really underscores the interconnectedness of our world. How an event in one location can have ripple effects that extend far beyond its immediate impact.
And that brings up an interesting point about the human element of this story. It's not just about the science and the statistics. It's about the people who lived through this event and how they've coped adapted, and ultimately thrived in the aftermath.
Yeah. It's a testament to the human spirit. Our ability to find strength and resilience, even in the face of incredible challenges.
Absolutely, and I think that's a powerful message to take away from this deep dive.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we define resilience.
Right.
It's not just about bouncing back, it's about adapting and evolving in the face of challenges.
It is. It's about learning from these events and using that knowledge to create a safer and more resilient future. The Bohol earthquake, I think, really underscores the fact that we're all interconnected, not just as human beings, but also with the earth itself.
Yeah, it's a humbling thought. We often think of ourselves as being separate from nature. But this earthquake really reminds us that we're very much a part of it, and our actions can have a significant impact.
And that's an important message to carry with us as we move forward. The Bohol earthquake wasn't just a localized event, it had global implications. What happened there has forced scientists to reevaluate seismic hazard maps in other parts of the world.
So it's made us question our understanding of earthquake risk, even in places where we thought we had a good grasp of the situation.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of continued research and monitoring, constantly seeking to improve our understanding of these complex geological processes. The Bohol earthquake has taught us that we can't always predict where the next disaster will strike.
Right. Which leads to a pretty big question. How can we possibly prepare for the unexpected? If hidden faults, like the one in Bohol, exist in other parts of the world, what can we do to minimize the risks?
That's the million-dollar question. While we can't prevent earthquakes, we can certainly take steps to mitigate their impact. We can learn from the experiences of communities like those in Bohol, who have shown remarkable resilience in rebuilding and adapting.
So what are some of the key takeaways from this deep dive? If you were talking to someone who wanted to learn from the Bohol earthquake, what would you tell them?
Well, I would emphasize the importance of preparedness. Having emergency plans in place, making sure buildings are up to code, knowing what to do during an earthquake. But I'd also stress the importance of community. The Boholanos came together to support each other in the aftermath of the earthquake. That sense of community, that willingness to help one another, was crucial to their recovery.
So it's not just about physical infrastructure and emergency supplies, but also about social infrastructure, those bonds of community that help us get through tough times.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to remember that we can't control everything. Natural disasters are a part of life on Earth. And while we can prepare for them, we also need to accept that there will always be some level of uncertainty.
So learning to live with that uncertainty while also doing everything we can to be prepared, that's essential for building resilience.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, and I think the Bohol earthquake serves as a powerful reminder of both the destructive power of nature and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
Well, there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the 2013 Bohol earthquake. We've uncovered some fascinating insights into the science behind this event, the devastating impact it had on the region, and the remarkable resilience of the people of Bohol.
It's a story that reminds us of the importance of preparedness, the power of community, and the need to constantly reevaluate our understanding of the world around us.
And as always, we encourage you to continue exploring, dive deeper into the topics that resonated with you, learn more about earthquake preparedness and disaster relief efforts, and maybe even plan a trip to Bohol someday to see firsthand the beauty and resilience of this incredible island. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.